Hi, welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. In this video, we are going to talk to Mr. Loren Swor about something that happened at his church with regard to Calvinism. One of the purposes that we're doing this is because I understand that a lot of different churches are having an issue with Calvinism, whether overt or covert, something we call Stealth Calvinism. And it might be helpful or edifying to hear the story of somebody else and what they went through. Maybe there's some lessons learned. Maybe there's something we can gather from this story. I think that it would be beneficial to share this story. So, Loren, welcome aboard.
It's good to be on video, I guess, with you, if you will.
There we go. Can you, in about 3 minutes, I want to ask you about your personal testimony, but just real briefly, maybe like a minute, briefly, kind of what happened at your church. What situation are we talking about tonight?
Sure. We'll do the nutshell, as you said. So basically, we brought a pastor on probably 3, maybe tops 4 years ago. We missed the subtle verbiage going on the front end. We rocked along for a year and a half. Everything's great. We had some folks that had been exposed to Calvinist problems in the past, and they started to catch the flags while we were still a little ignorant, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then we started learning slowly becoming aware, if you will, or woke, maybe even might be the right word. We tried to address it. I was an elder at our church, and so and a teacher also, a Sunday school teacher, and we kept trying to address it, and probably not successfully. It kept getting bigger as we tried to deal with it, and it just wouldn't go away. And then finally came to a head, and the result was the only way to keep the church standing potentially was for all the elders to resign, and probably about half the staff resign. Like most have left the church, if not will, or if not haven't already. So really tough time as that goes. Whether we dealt with it right or wrong is to be determined, but definitely a critical blow to our church.
Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine the social impact. I think this is one of those situations where nobody walks away feeling like they did completely the right thing.
Right.
You probably feeling a little bit of that, I'd imagine.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's still at the same time, you felt that something needed to be done.
Correct.
Now, I would say that I would suspect I've seen on the side of Calvinists who want to infiltrate and take over churches for Calvinism, they come in, they are premeditated, and they have a plan, and they expect opposition, and they already kind of have a plan on how they plan to address that opposition. Whereas Joe Pewsitter doesn't see it coming. They're not ready for it. They've never fought this fight before, and they're not prepared for it. They don't have any strategy, whether right or wrong. They just don't. Basically, they're in reaction mode, and the person who is infiltrating has the opportunity to be a little more proactive, which is it's just a bad situation to be in. Would you mind kind of taking me through, just kind of tell me what your testimony as a Christian is? How did you become a Christian? How long you've been a Christian? What's your walk with the Lord? And like leading from the time, I guess, your testimony leading up to this event with the church that happened recently.
Sure. Well, I mean, mine's not a dynamic testimony. I'm a lifelong Christian. Luckily, I had a great Christian family. My mother, what a great Christian lady. She passed away several years ago, but just she was just sold out to the Lord. Gave her all her heart. She was passionate for missions, for youth, and everything. So she set a great example for me. I came to know the Lord at 8. So at 8 years old, you're not really don't have much of a sin background other than typical stuff. So
which
as
is
that
fine.
goes, yeah, that's okay, right? Although I did stray in my teenage years, and I did some dumb stuff, as many have. I'm nothing exceptional there. And I came from Kansas, and now I live in Oklahoma. And relocating to Oklahoma and starting the new here, really was a fresh start in my Christian walk. Checked into a great church, and really, it was an incredible chance to plug in. No one knew my past. Not was bad, but I was kind of like a new person and really dug in and renewed my faith. and spent 30 years basically at our church. So grown a lot. I got a long ways to grow, but really have enjoyed missions overseas. We've had a strong missions program in the past, and I've been lucky enough to go on several trips, and man, that just opens up your eyes. So, and I enjoyed teaching, taught for about 20 years, young adults. Just been a wonderful time, and it's kind of cool to see that. Not that I'm a better person, but that I'm growing as a Christian. I'm always learning and stuff like that. Although that's what we're going to find today. I'm pretty ignorant in some areas too, but it is what it is, you know. So but that's my nutshell testimony. Nothing exceptional, but really blessed as that. I'm really thankful that I haven't had to have the terrible suffering that some had to go through to come to Christ, you know. So
right. Yeah. So you talk about being ignorant and having place to grow. I think some Christians, and I'm not trying to be accusatory or anything, but we're basically kind of naive because you think you're within Christianity, you can kind of let your guard down. It's not like you're there to grow and transform and try to be closer to Christ. You don't realize sometimes there's going to be a fight. There's maybe wolves among the flock or something like that, or some problem that needs to be dealt with, or maybe some tragedy that needs to be dealt with. It could be anything from addiction to murder to family problems. And then when we address the problem, we're just not ready for the problems. And then when the problems are rivalrous, I've been in rivalrous situations before. It's very difficult to do anything in a rivalrous situation and still feel clean. Yeah. And like you did everything you think you should have done. Like, okay, something is wrong here. Maybe I have an opportunity to help set it right, or what is mine to do? And if you don't do anything, you can't live with yourself. But then when you do something, you didn't do it exactly as you perfectly should have in hindsight.
Right. Yeah, you're too strong, too soft. You offend someone. There's just no perfect way to navigate those waters. I agree.
Yeah, you're going to get your hands dirty. Like somebody said, a psychologist said, when you go to fight the dragon, you're going to get burned. You're going to get soot on you. And I really don't think there's any way to have any kind of controversy and be the person dealing with it where that doesn't happen.
You're going to get bloody. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope that's kind of encouraging. Hope it's kind of encouraging to other Christians, not that you'll get bloody and dirty, but that don't be so hard on yourself when you try to do something and you wind up, you didn't do it perfectly. Maybe you can be blamed for something. Maybe something didn't go perfectly right and you could have done something better. And that's okay. It's okay. It's better to try and fail than to not try anything. Or to try and not do it perfectly.
I'm a big fan. I love the quote, and I'll probably mess up a little bit. When good men fail, to speak or step up, then evil prevails. And so sometimes we make the wrong step, but you have to step forward. It's painful. It's tough sometimes, but stand on the sideline when you see wrong happening. It's not okay,
So how you said you've been there for 30 years in this church?
Yeah, that's correct.
How long ago? And the most recent pastor, and we're not here to point fingers or blame names or anything necessarily. We're just trying to learn from what happened. How long has he been here? What point in your 30-year journey at that church did he come, and how was the onboarding process? And I know you mentioned a second ago that there were some people there who had already experienced Calvinism who started recognizing flags. So what was it like to bring him on? How long ago was that? And then kind of talk us through where people started noticing some of these flags, and then what happened from there.
Yeah. Okay. And well, first of all, let me qualify something. When I watched your videos, it was like, what to do if you have Calvinism in church. I felt like you were sitting in our pews watching everything that had been happening. So it's like, well, how did you know all those things? It's pretty freaky. So as I speak this,
I have a lot of stories, and unfortunately, a lot of them are almost exactly like yours. The only way they differ is in what people decide to do about it. But the template for takeover is pretty much the same.
It's sad, but so I guess as I speak, I tell people who might hear this, please hear what happened and learn from the mistakes that we made in our ignorance as I share the story. So it's a great story, and it all happens on the front end. So I'm an elder at our church, one of 5 elders, okay? So we're not part of the search committee. We have a search committee that goes out looking for a pastor. Probably around 4 years ago. I could be off 6 months or a year. You get the gist. Not too long ago. They pick a candidate. Candidate comes forward, and one of the key.
So let me. I hate to interrupt you, but you have a search committee. Is there anybody helping them? Is there any Is there an associational missionary or a fellowship or a convention? Is there anybody from outside the church who has any kind of influence on this?
No, not in this case.
Or a professor or a seminary?
No, nothing.
Okay. Just curious.
And usually we might have had an elder on there, but in this case, which I really don't want to go into details, we didn't have an elder on this search committee. We'll just let that one slide, but there was a reason. But so they found this candidate, a couple ones, and we interviewed them. And the question came up. There are two questions. Are you literal creation? 7-day creation, which is it's always a good subject to discuss. And then, are you a Calvinist?
So that question was asked.
Oh, what's that?
That question was asked.
Oh yes. Oh, you're gonna like this. Yeah. You didn't know this. So he was a literal creationist. Like, all right, we're rock and rolling Calvinists. Now, you got to remember, most of us are just ignorant, and ignorant's not a good or bad word. It's a descriptive word. But we were ignorant, and so the response was, don't like to call myself a Calvinist. I have a Reformed theology, and I'm not a hyper Calvinist. So, two good plays right there. And I'm going to call it like it is now. I know what was going down. I was ignorant then, but so you throw us off, say, well, I'm not a hyper Calvinist. Like, oh, good. I don't know what that is, but he's not a hyper Calvinist. That's great. And then we come in with also, he says, Reformed theology. And I feel stupid now, but Reformed theology, I thought, we're talking Reformation, Martin Luther. That sounds good, Sure.
You look at the Reformation as a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that sounded good. So we all, and listen, folks, too, if you're listening, don't stop until you know the answers. If you hear something you don't understand, ask more. But we all tapped out and went, not really sure what all that meant, but it sounded pretty good. I'm going to go, that sounds great. Thumbs up. We got, all us elders and a full search committee, and everybody's like, so luckily there's one gal, I love her to death. And she goes, she's the one only smart enough in the room to ask a question. She goes, so he's saying he's not a Calvinist. And the youth guy goes, oh no, he's saying he is. And then we all, but we just telling. Oh yeah. We just sit there and go,
it's intentional.
What's going on here? What's that?
It's intentional confusion. Yeah, it's intentional confusion. They're intentionally obscure. Yes.
We got played. Yeah. I mean, we all get God, and we got God, and it was all of us. So that happened. So that slid on through. None of us chased it. And so that was that, and the pastor was called. And do we want me to just keep going forward from here, how time goes on? or
yeah. Might as well.
Okay. We rock along probably a year and a half. Things are going great. No complaints there. Doing a great job. Pastor's spot on. And I'll try to kind of filter this out so I don't point out too much. Flag starts to go off with some youth events. And there's a young man who's tied into all this. And he does a presentation, kind of a youth in-house weekend event. And he basically is sharing election, if you will. And there's a couple people like, what? Did you catch that? And then most of the kids, I wasn't there, but my daughter came home and goes, I didn't hear it. And if you don't know what you're listening for, but there are a few people who've seen Calvinism, and one gal at our church who's already left before all this, she caught it. And she goes, that's Calvinism. I know what that is. And so I know there were some conversations with the youth guy who I do not believe.
Said you don't know what you're listening for.
Yeah, you just don't catch it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's ironic. There were some youth there that from another church that were with us that day. They caught it, and so the next day they had a chance to speak, and I guess they actually kind of refuted that and what free will was. And so on.
Some little pulpit wars.
if you don't know the words, you could be sitting there not even know what's going on,
That's right. That's right.
So ignorance was still going. Not too much happened. A little flare up there, and it kind of went away. This particular lady, her father's a pastor, and they'd experienced some problems with, I think, in his church from Calvinism. And then she, I think, had a dating relationship with someone. Then there had been some Calvinist problems. So it had really been inflaming her life. So she was aware. And she actually been to seminary. So a very, very sharp lady. Things kind of die down, and we're kind of starting to be aware of it and watching Facebook posts. And so there's starting to be a problem, because now you start saying, oh, what is Reformed theology? And we start seeing the pastors popping off on Reformed theology. And then a couple from my class, he'd gone to seminary, and we became aware that they're like, they go, they told one of the staff members, your pastor's a Calvinist. And like, what are you talking about?
What is that?
They catch it, and aren't you, they said to one of the staff members, aren't you a Calvinist? And she goes, no, why would you think that? Because your pastor is, like, what's going on here?
Oh my.
So it's kind of coming on. So we began to ask him to kind of tone back the rhetoric on Facebook. It's like, when you speak, and this is true, and I have no problem saying this, when a pastor speaks on a social media platform, you speak for the church, and the contention might have been, well, I'm just speaking for me. Like, no, if you're a pastor, your voice points to the church. That's what represents the beliefs of the church. So we kind of went back and forth, continued. It just went on and on. Like, can you please stop? I'll stop. Please stop. I'm back. I'm off Facebook. I'm on Facebook. It was kind of back and forth. But that's where people a lot of times really, keyboard warriors truly show, their true colors, if you will, I don't know if something happens magic when people start typing.
The anonymity of the web.
Yes.
Yeah.
So not too much is going on then. And then there's I guess one night, this young man is late in the night at another youth event at Falls Creek, where you may be for Falls Creek. It's a big camp in Oklahoma for Southern Baptists. And at that night, he shares late in the morning with 4 or 5 of the young boys about Calvinism. Straight up tulip. He's going through the tulip. And you're like, uh-oh, what's going on? So it makes a stink, and it flares back up. And we become aware of it. And we address it again. And now we have a parent meeting with the pastor and the youth guy. And, it really, I was hoping we could find some peace and it would be worked out. But it really didn't, nothing was resolved. We kind of had two parties. Pastor wasn't standing down, felt like he was maligned, and the parents, they felt strongly how they felt, especially the one that the lady that had come experienced some damage from Calvinism in her past. So we kind of continue to try to get a hold on this, and about that time, your videos start being shown to us. We start seeing that.
So how did that happen? Did somebody just do a Google search, or did somebody recommend them?
I think they were Googling along, if you will, and they're finding laden flowers. And then I think you kind of, find laden, you'll probably find yourself, not too far to the peripheral there. And then your Calvinism video got shown to us, and you're like, oh, that's just flat freaking me out, And suddenly that's the first time you become aware of all these boxes being checked about, are you kidding? Is this really happening? And one of the elders, he made a comment later on, just real recently. He goes, when Loren showed me that video from that Kevin Thompson guy about a year ago, I thought he was bat nutty. And he goes, no, I think he's pretty much right. It's like, it seems crazy when you first hear it,
Yeah, it seems kind of radical. Like, no, that wouldn't be going on at a church. That's conspiracy theory stuff.
Right.
But then there it is.
Kind of let you know what's going on. The solas were being taught, things were really just gospel alone, were really reigning in, which really does sound good. And the gospel in itself, let me clarify, folks, is awesome. So I'm not maligning the gospel. We got to be careful here, but you and I know that there's a different, spin on it.
But when somebody claims to be the sole proprietor of the gospel, as if any disagreement with them is non-gospel. That's right. And of course, the only translation now that's any good, is ESV. I like to look at a lot of different translations because you can kind of get a little different perspective, but that's just me.
so we become hearing these things, and
yeah, it's interesting how those fads go, because there was a while where the NASB was the Calvinist favorite, and then it's shifted over to the ESV. So it's not this hard and fast rule, but it's like a trend thing. You got your KJV people, that's like a hard and fast rule, but this other thing is kind of trendy. It's like it's got a pattern to it. There's like a zeitgeist to it. It's not so much a rule, but you can kind of spot them anyway.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you. Right. You start just checking these boxes. There's a lot of little boxes that you can check along the way. And then we started talking about the attributes of God, which those are all good too. I mean, and I guess I should back up. Where it really started to probably roll in was a Romans Bible study in the evenings, and sounds great, So
I want to pause you just for a second before you get into Romans, and just like a little teachable moment there. You talked about the solas and then the attributes of God, and what we try to uncover on the channel is that Calvinists like to take good things from the Christian meme complex, like the attributes of God, or like the solas or whatever. Now, the solas are not distinctives of Calvinism. They are featured by Calvinism. So there are people who are non-Calvinists who believe the five solas. But what they do is they take these things that just about everybody would agree on, and they use it as a Trojan horse, as the banner, as the cover story, to pack their Calvinism into it. Like if you believe in the omniscience of God, well, here's the only, Calvinism is the only way to properly understand that. And if you don't go with Calvinism, then you don't really believe in the omniscience of God, that kind of thing. And they'll do that with each positive thing that people agree on. So they have to take their distinctive teaching and latch it onto something that is part of base Christianity, so that it seems legitimate and so that it is accepted. It's like like an implied sub-doctrine or something of the thing that everybody already accepts. Yep, so I encourage people to watch out for that. Watch out for topical stuff, because topical stuff is typically a Trojan horse to bring in a lot of other things that aren't necessarily scriptural. And that's in any domain, not just Calvinism. And I say that as being a person who's probably been guilty of that myself.
Yeah, anyway, I totally get that.
The Roman study.
Yeah. Once again, and folks, these things sound so right. I mean, solas sound good. All these things, attributes of God, a Roman study, everything, not a word of it is bad in itself. It's just this groundwork being laid underneath, and you don't even know it's happening. Of course, once again, the gal that was there, she was throwing the flag up. She was catching what was going down. And so, what this is, you know where he's going. He's going to Romans 8 and 9. And so it finally, I can't remember all the details, but someone finally said, so what do you believe? When we got to the 8 and 9, they said, where do you fall on this, election? And he kind of came out and said, yeah, that's what I believe. And I'm like, so the cat was kind of out of the bag. And by that point, we had a lot of people who were kind of on Sunday evenings becoming aware of it. I honestly was not going because I honestly was not pleased with what I was already seeing, right or wrong. You can criticize me for that. I'm open to that, but I just wasn't happy. I didn't want to be there to hear it. I knew what was going on wasn't a good thing for me, at least in my family on the evenings.
Yeah.
So that really started to get some stink going down, and then it all. COVID came along, and I think it bought some cover time, shut the study down because it was really, really blowing up. It was starting to get hot and heavy. But I would say at this point, only 5% of our church population had the slightest idea, maybe even 3% of what was even going on and even what Calvinism still meant. Okay.
Wow.
So we get into... We started to roll out of COVID, which, I messed up everything. You get that. And probably I'm trying to think this fall, things started getting heating up. And that's when we had the parent meeting. We just couldn't keep things from becoming more and more drawn out. And as we saw more of the flags.
You said you had a parent meeting?
I'm sorry, youth parents were kind of upset and they wanted to talk about some of the issues.
Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, that really didn't go anywhere.
Was the youth pastor doing something too, or was it the pastor talking to the youth? What was going on with the youth again?
Well, there was one lesson I think that was taught from our youth guy where he did talk about election. And he told me, it was a very, very good friend of mine. I miss him dearly. He kind of broke the friendship off as this all blew up. But he said he had always been reformed. I didn't know that. And I've had others say that he said he wasn't reformed when he came to our church. But it started to come out, my daughter caught it actually one time when they were doing some Way of the Master stuff, which is really good stuff, I think.
Yeah. That's what's that guy's name? Ray Comfort.
Yeah, Ray Comfort. Yeah. Him and Kirk
Cameron too.
He is risen.
He is.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
Yeah. It's Calvinist and
he's
Lord's
aggressive.
Salvation. Yeah. It's disappointing, isn't it?
Oh, man. I hope Kirk Cameron's not. I kind of like him.
I don't know specifically. I would be suspicious that he is just because he's associating with Ray Comfort, but I don't know personally whether or not he is for sure. I haven't verified it
definitely
myself.
Evangelistic. But we were doing some great evangelism, because you can use that platform and it's a very effective way to go out and, address that. But what my daughter caught it, she said, "Hey, Dad, what he's saying is when we go and knock on a door, he's saying you're 100% guaranteed success because it's already decided whether they're going to accept or not accept Christ." I'm like, "What?" She actually caught a recording of it and played it back for me. I'm like, no, I don't buy that.
And was that out of the Way of the Master material, or was that from the youth person?
Guy? Our youth guy said that, yeah. And that's not hearsay. That's fact. She recorded one time. I was like, I just told her, "Honey, that's not the way we believe. I believe, I passionately care about people when I share Christ, and if I see someone drifting away, I'm like, no, come back. I want you to hear this good news. This is good news," and it drives me back crazy. Whereas I believe the Calvinists would go, it didn't matter. You weren't.
It's interesting. Like if you listen to Calvinists talk about John 10, they will say things like, "He that is of God heareth God's words. Ye hear not because you're not of God," out of John 8. And then, "My sheep hear my voice." And they talk as if the people who are elect are the sheep, and they will, when they hear the gospel, that they automatically, because they're elect, recognize the voice of the shepherd, and then they start following the shepherd. They become regenerated, follow the shepherd. So what Jesus says is, "My sheep hear my voice." He doesn't say, "My sheep hear my voice when they're ready." You know what I'm saying? But when I talk to Calvinists, like for example, Greg Kokel is a Calvinist, and he has a book out there called Tactics, and he talks about this. You're going out to evangelize people, and some people, they're not sheep, but the sheep will raise their head and listen. But then he throws this little phrase in there later. He says, "But some people don't listen either because they're not sheep or because they aren't ready." Well, that answer's not given in John 10.
Right.
They have to admit some people don't hear the gospel for the first time. Some people hear it multiple times and then get saved later. But that's not in keeping with your interpretation of John 10. You're telling me the sheep hear the voice, and that means the elect, when they hear the gospel, those are the magic words, and they get saved. But that's not the way it happens. So they use the proof text in one sense, and then as soon as real life hits, they abandon what the proof text says for something they just add on to it. Oh, because they're not ready. Like the Apostle Paul. He hears the gospel. I mean, he's obviously elect because he's one of the apostles, right? In Christ before the foundation of the world, right? So he hears the gospel from Stephen, but does not accept it. He does not get regenerated when he hears that. "Whatever happened to my sheep hear my voice?"
That's right.
You see? But then later on, God has to knock him down and blind him. And then we find out that, so he doesn't get saved. He doesn't send Ananias to help him out till after he prays, after he gets knocked down and blinded. Acts chapter 9, I think it's verse 11 or so. But anyway, so this little narrative that Calvinists have of, you just evangelize and the elect will respond, that has scope creep on it in project
Yeah.
management terms. It grows and
Well,
morphs. That's not really what they mean.
I think I bring in maybe an interesting perspective. I'm an engineer by trade. Okay, so
Yeah.
prone to be more logical, if you will, and read through the Bible, obviously. And my contention is, when you read the Bible from front to end, you look at it logically, you go, I see a God of the Old Testament, New Testament, wherever, calling to people, and passionately calling, and then so many times we see, chastising, punishing, especially the Jews, if you will. But why does he waste all this time and this effort and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words, dialogue, calling to people, trying to redeem them, calling them back? And yes, and I want to admit, when I hit election verses, go ahead, sorry.
So that's you. That what you just said is that you recognize a difference. After reading the Bible, you recognize a difference. Now, to hear a Calvinist talk, they will say that you're following your tradition, you're following your presuppositions, you're following what you've been taught, but you're talking about, you read the Bible, and the God presented in the Bible does not match the God of Calvinism. No, and it's not the God of your traditions, not the God of your presuppositions, but the God of the Bible. See, that Calvinist thinks that we all reject Calvinism because we can't emotionally handle it or because we're attached to some other traditions. And that's not the case. You got sincere, earnest people trying to follow Scripture, and they just see that they don't match. Anyway, I didn't mean to derail you. You were talking about...
No, that was fine. As I read through the Bible, I will admit, I mean, it's important to be honest. When I hit election verses through the years of reading, especially in the New Testament, I hit those verses, I was a little confused. I scratched my head. You're like, well, I'm not sure what the context is. But I always knew, it just doesn't fit everything I've read through the years. And even as I go on through the New Testament.
If you interpret it that way, it creates contradictions with 100 other things. So maybe that's not the correct interpretation. Maybe I need to suspend judgment on that until I look into it a little more. I'm not going to subvert the entire rest of the Bible because of this one obscure verse, which might be able to be interpreted a different way if you look at it funny with your eyes squinted.
Right. And so I always said, okay, that verse, we're going to highlight it. I've circled in my Bible, let's keep researching that, try to understand that. And I guess I should pause and make a quick point there. When we would talk about Calvinism, when we're talking with our pastor, trying to resolve this issue, this rift that was kept going on, at least for me as I spoke, I always said, look, you think you're right, I think I'm right. I said, but I'm willing to concede that it's a mystery. I said, I'll concede, I'll let it fall in the middle. It's a mystery. I don't totally understand election because, we do know God knows all, and I don't want to get in that. Obviously, we could chase that long and hard and try to understand that. But we understand that God is so much more knowledgeable than we are, and the things he understands baffles my brain. But the problem was with a Calvinist is, and you probably know, you've heard this term but probably a lot, but I wasn't aware of it, you'll get there. And that's what they think. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're always wrong to a Calvinist, and they will never concede to the middle ground. And that's a problem.
It's not that they are lacking a good explanation. It's that you haven't grown to the point where you're willing to accept it. It's a problem with you. With you. So that is how you spot an ideolog. They, instead of being able to detail why their ideology is correct, they detail some kind of error or flaw in you for why you can't accept it. You'll get there. See, it's your problem. It's not their ideology's problem. It's your problem.
Yeah, and our church would be together today because I do believe, and you might disagree with this, and that's okay. I think a pastor can probably be a closet Calvinist and still get along. If he doesn't push the agenda, I think you can do fine, but it's when it wants to become an agenda, when you want to make a church a reformed church, you really got problems. And that's why we're always trying to concede in that middle ground. Look, if we can just leave it alone. But that's what was so amazing. It's like they can't leave it alone.
Well, I think there's some different kind of Calvinists out there. You have, I just did a video on Martin Lloyd-Jones and how they try to defuse the red flags and your defensiveness by saying, I don't consider it to be essential and all this kind of stuff. But they do that to get under the big umbrella. But I do think there are legitimately some Calvinists who they went to seminary and they got taught Calvinism as if that is just the deeper level of doctrines that they never learned in church. And they don't see it as different. They see it as deeper. And it never even occurred to them to argue against it. And so then they came from a Southern Baptist church. They went to seminary. They learned the deeper doctrines. Now they're going back to a Southern Baptist church. So now it's not so much that they're a stealth Calvinist or a closet Calvinist. It's just they just happen to be one and don't know that there's a difference. They don't know that it's two different things. They think it's deepness and shallowness, if you will.
I agree.
So I would not go say that every Calvinist pastor out there that's in a church that is not overtly Calvinist is necessarily maliciously stealthful, although I would probably think that a majority of them are. But I do think there are some out there who they're just lost in the sauce to everybody else. You kind of have to become a Calvinist anyway.
Well, see, I didn't think that there was a plan initially. I didn't want to believe it. But when I started watching your stuff and the box kept getting checked, I'm like, oh no. I mean, it's just rubbing your head going, this can't be happening. And I really hoped that we weren't too far down the road that we could recover. I really did. Man, certainly we can turn this around. And once again, asking for, can we leave it alone? And which I don't understand, Kevin, maybe you understand better, why they can't leave it alone. Why? Our contention as elders a lot of times was, look, there's 999 or 1,000 different things we can talk about, and you can probably not have to touch on key Calvinist verses, but all the sermons kept having the words. Once if you're woke and you listen to the words, that's one of the things I told our pastor. He was upset as that people
it's like a dog whistle.
Do what?
It's like a dog whistle, little code words.
Oh yeah. Well, he was upset because he felt like he was getting villainized for being reformed, and people were out and they're beating him up. And he wasn't preaching bold Calvinism from the pulpit. You probably know the routine. You can just do these things on the side, the peripheral, and you start walking people down that path very gently. And one of the things I always told him, I said, especially on Facebook, I said, look, when you went on Facebook and you got on Reformed theology pages and started sharing your opinion and people were following you, saw it, I said, pardon my French, but it's a great analogy. Or you put the MAGA hat on and took a picture on Facebook. Everybody knows you're a Trump supporter. It's just right. You're picking sides. Good or bad, you're identified as that, and so that was one of the problems. And look, you made yourself known publicly, and now we're trying. One of the contention was you made a big mess when you did that, and we're trying to cover it up, put some kitty litter on it, whatever. It's hard to put it back in the bottle, if you will, and he didn't like that. And he never would be willing to, just let it go or be a mystery or back off the rhetoric, if you will.
So I think that, I don't want anybody to take offense at this, including you, but I do think it's a little naive to think that something that drastic can be a peripheral thing that can be left off to the side, because it'd be almost like if someone has blood cancer, be like, look, man, the rest of your body, 90% of your body is fine. You just got a problem with the blood. Can you just get rid of that and just don't use blood anymore? It's like this thing where they have bad axioms, and we got some videos on that. But when you have bad axioms, it really flavors everything you see. So it's kind of impossible, really, to interpret almost any passage, especially in the New Testament, especially in the book of John. It's almost impossible to interpret any passage consistently while leaving out that ideology to which they are beholden. For example, they're going to hit John, I think it's John 3:27, no man can receive anything except it's given to him of the Father. And that is, every time I've heard a Calvinist quote that, they divorce it from what the context is about Jesus Christ's ship, if you will. It's really what it's about. But they make it about personal salvation for individuals, and they also overlook the fact that the grace of God, which brings salvation, hath been revealed to all men. It already has, and then the gift. The gift of justification of life has been given, so it can be received. There's so many things they overlook, but the point I guess I'm trying to make is that I really don't think that by the time a Calvinist is verbalizing their Calvinism, especially from a pulpit, I don't think that they can separate it and teach any Bible without that coming through it if they think it's true.
From what I've seen, I agree. I totally agree. It just can't leave it. Just can't leave it alone, right?
They can't.
It's like a passion suddenly. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like the color of the carpet or disagreeing on tithing or something like that. It's not like that. It's not like it's ingrained. It's enmeshed in. Anyway.
Well, a perfect example was one time we were having a discussion in one of our meetings, and I said, look, I don't push my free will perspective. I said so much. He goes, sure you do. He said, you've been teaching 20 years. Of course you do. I said, no. I said, I've actually gotten to election verses, and I just said, look, there's a bit of a mystery here, chosen these key words. And I said, and I'm willing to say, hey, and honestly, what I told my class was, go home, study, read up on it, and I don't push agenda. But the other side, right. No way, man. We're gonna tell you what it means. You'll get there. I mean, that's the catchphrase. You'll get there. Now I hate that phrase. I absolutely hate that phrase because I know what it means, and it's not a good thing at all.
Yeah, it's kind of a misnomer too when they start talking about free will agenda. We have a video called Calvinist Paradigm Tree, where it talks about the axioms of Calvinism and how our axioms shouldn't be anything about the will, but they should be something about scriptural authority, if that makes sense. And so we actually are making the same mistake as Calvinists. When a Calvinist talks to us and they say, we got no free will, you believe in free will, well, to have any axiom of the will at all is not the right place to start. The right place to start is scriptural authority. That's one of the ways they get you. They get us, one of the ways they get us is by taking our focus off scriptural authority and getting it on one of these peripheral things and getting us to treat that as if it's axiomatic rather than what scripture actually says.
Absolutely.
It's clever.
Absolutely.
It's so clever.
But very intelligent, and so you really, a lot of times you got to check yourself like, well, what? It's a difficult battle.
You feel like you got a frontal lobotomy by the time you finish talking to one of them.
Absolutely.
Because all the word games.
And I'll say this, and I don't mean to be hurtful, but looking back, one of the things I realized was, I believe, and I apologize if I hurt people's feelings with this, but one of the things was, hey, come in and talk to me, was what the pastor would say. Have any questions, come to my study and I'll help you. And I didn't realize, but now looking back, I mean, I honestly feel like come in and I'll get you behind closed doors and I'll show you what to believe, how to believe, and I'll get you there if you will, and I hate that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I never would have thought it. I thought that sounds great. Come, my door's open. Come on in. Now it's like I feel like it was a spider web. Come on in, and oh, it's too late.
Right. He's a meme complex propagator, and they're sticky like a spider web, and you try to get your way out, and you can't.
Yes, and so going forward, things started getting a little hotter, a little heavier, and not to go into get too many of the gory details to hurt things, but basically, I became convinced that we had to probably. I was watching some Latent Flowers, some of your stuff, and I finally felt like we probably needed to make a statement. All the elders believed in free will, okay? And so I felt like it was necessary to put a statement of, basically stating our free will. And Latent Flowers has some stuff on his site there. And so basically took that kind of here's what it means that this is kind of where we want to go. And it didn't go over so well. You can imagine.
So what happened there?
Well, it's like, this is like a pink slip, is what the comment was. And I'm like, well, kind of maybe sort of, yeah. No one's running anybody off. It's like, but so at this point, we kind of ran into a difficult position where, as elders, we've always worked together and agreed, but we we had a slight difference of opinion, or a major, but we were still friends, and we all left together and stayed together. But it's okay to disagree sometimes when you're working things out. The pastor said he'd like to present his Reformed theology position to the church. Myself and another elder were totally against that. The other guys, they said, well, maybe. And I don't even fault them. I just have a different opinion. I don't think it's a good thing.
Say okay, you get to do that, and then afterwards we'll have Leighton Flowers come. Something like that.
That was my contention, right.
That might have been a good response,
Well, that's what I wanted.
We'll have somebody come follow up and give the other side.
I wanted that. I was like, okay, I don't like it being presented at all. It never should have been, because if we go back to the beginning statement, the statement I may not said earlier when we did the search committee was Calvinism, it won't be a problem. Everybody remembers that statement. The pastor says, I give a 15-minute dissertation on my Calvinist beliefs. All of us, other than a couple folks, say, no, you said about 1 minute and we didn't understand what you said. But it was always, it won't be a problem. This has become a problem. And so now wanting to present Reformed theology to the church, that's a problem. I don't care who you are. If you go back to that original statement, that's a problem. And so you're breaking, there was deception. There's no doubt. There was deception at that point. I'm like, no, this is becoming very obvious. When you want to share your Reformed theology to the church, when you told me 3 years ago, that wouldn't be a problem, it's a problem. So, that's
right. Yeah.
So
things change over time.
Yeah.
Frog in the boiling water analogy.
That's exactly right. So we kind of came to a disagreement there, and I was not happy that he was going to be able to present on a Sunday night his Reformed theology. I'll still stand against that, and I always will. Unopposed, if you will. And none of us elders were not competent enough or skilled to articulate a counter position.
Right.
I'm not there. I'm learning. I got a long ways to go before I could ever take that position.
That's a real problem. It's a real problem. I mean, these guys have been trained. They're essentially professionals. They've been to school for this. That's what they're trained in. You're trained in engineering, and you're just not ready. I mean, if we want to talk about engineering, you'd be there all day, but this is something else. And so you only have one expert, and he's very biased. What does everybody else do? It's a very difficult situation to be in.
Absolutely. So at this point, it was agreed that you could do that. And then some things kind of came up to a head. I guess some information got leaked, not from the elders. And on Sunday morning, the pastor basically kind of threw I don't want to go too much details, but threw the elders under the bus, saying that we didn't want him to preach the gospel. Yeah.
That's how they got to word it, too.
What do you do? I mean,
we don't have a problem with the gospel. We got a problem with Reformed theology. And if you think they're the same, that's your problem.
I'm just preaching. I just want to share doctrines of grace. Reform. I just want the gospel. And our congregation, they didn't know what they were hearing. Ignorant as I was also previously. So I can't fault them. He had the podium, he had the pulpit, and he used it. I mean, Kevin, you and I talked a little bit. I mean, it broke my heart. It's really, 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 really toughest day I've ever had in church. And folks, you can't imagine what it's like when your pastor starts saying that on a Sunday morning to your church. Worst day in my church life ever. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was so angry. Right or wrong, I was very, very, very angry. I was very, very hurt. There were a lot of people that were called in advance. And so, hey, Kevin, I guess we should address this, because this goes back and supports what you talked about, a 5-year, 10-year, 14-year plan.
Yeah.
When the cat got out of the bag with the youth thing, it advanced the plan. I'm confident now. And anyone says, well, there couldn't have been a plan. Well, let me tell you how I know there was a plan. And I hate it, but this has to be a warning to the other churches. There were people called in that weren't from our church, people I never knew, members from an old congregation.
Yep.
There were people praying at the altar before the service, which is not that there's anything bad about that, but like, what's up with that? And there are people coming in already having knowledge. They're coming in preparing for the takeover of the ideology. As this ideology gets presented, Lord, please let it captivate the hearts of these ignorant people. They even started somehow that there was going to be a vote to remove the pastor. That's impossible. It doesn't work that way. we had some serious discussions in elders, but I don't want to go into those because they're confidential, and they were always kept confidential.
Sounds like they're trying to create an enemy. They're trying to create an opposition. Now, a little teachable moment there, just for everybody listening, is that there's a lot of virtue signaling going around, and victimhood is easily substituted in the mind for virtue. Okay.
Yep.
So, like when you see a battered woman go to a shelter for battered women, for some reason we tend to impute virtue to the people who have been victimized. You know, when you see minorities who are beat up by white cops and stuff like that, or when they marched in Selma, because something bad happened to them, we tend to impute virtue to them, like there's some kind of virtuous, upstanding thing. And for all you know, the person that, it's not good if the police are pulling the dogs and the water hoses on the protesters, but those protesters might be child molesters too. I mean, you just don't know. Right. But the point that I'm making though is that when somebody is what I call non-epistemic ranking criteria. When somebody has a point to get across and the epistemic merits aren't enough to get the point across, they will couch it in the virtue of victimhood. Oh, they're trying to vote us out. They're trying to get rid of us. They're against us. They're attacking us. And then you have sympathy for them. And because somebody's against you, you without realizing it, you impute virtue to them. Like you take it to an extreme example. Every time you hear about somebody being martyred and burned at the stake, you tend to venerate those people like they're these great godly saints. And right. You don't know anything about them. They got burned at the stake. That's horrible. That shouldn't have happened. The people who did it definitely aren't virtuous, but we really don't know that they were.
That's right.
But that is a little game that people play, that even if there's no conspiracy going against them, they talk one up so that they're perceived as a victim, so that people impute virtue in their head and start to come to their defense. Oh, it's so terrible that this is happening to you, brother.
Absolutely.
I just can't believe that. That's how the game is played.
And that was the game. I mean, and because even on this certain situation, there was somehow texts and things started going around about be there Sunday for the vote. Well, I can promise you, elders never share confidential information. There was no vote.
Right.
This was so the only place you can come from, that could have come from. You can figure that one out without me having to say it. So. Yep. And there were things being posted.
So that was ginned up as a false flag.
Oh, yeah. And even our youth guy, my good friend in the past, posted a Jeff Durbin Calvinism video on Facebook. I'm like, on Friday night preceding the service, like, I thought you told me you would never, ever share Calvinism with our kids. He told me and a good friend of mine that would never happen. He assured us, and there he was doing it. And I'm like, then people posting on Facebook, like, whose side are you on? And I'm like, what is going on? Where's this coming from? So there was this preparation for this takeover.
Rivalrous dynamics. Whose side are you on? So whenever there's a controversial thing, it suddenly becomes a team sport rather than people earnestly gathering together to try to explore and find the truth together. It's now a team thing. It's us versus them. It's rivalrous.
But this should have always been kept in confidence. It was. Mm-hmm. It was confidential issues, and they were not to be shared. Other than he was going to share his Reformed theology on Sunday night against my wishes, but it was still, hey, that was behind closed doors, and all right, it was agreed and voted, and I was going to go. And then, so it all kind of blew up, and a lot of things were said and deceptions we said, and so that really was kind of the nail that killed everything. At that point, going forward, folks, it was too late probably to save the church. And we really ended up with, did we want to just burn it down, to the ground, or were we willing to walk away and pray that, I don't know, that something good can come from it? Really a struggle there to fall on the sword and walk away. But the pastor said, I'm staying. I'm not going to go anywhere. And to sit there and fight and just destroy this church. This church is 85 years. The church is in a rougher part of town. It has a great ministry. Man, it's a lighthouse in the community. Of course, you have mixed emotions. In some ways, don't want to admit you want bad sometimes. Oh, I hope they fail. And then that's not right. That's not what Christ would want. Like, okay,
so,
I hope the church can prosper, but I don't want Calvinism to prosper. That's the problem,
Well, I think so. This is an opportunity for perspectival knowing to come in and be helpful. All right, I think where I think we get myopia and we're thinking of just our church, like we want this church to fail. But if you think of the body of Christ at large, mm-hmm. and this church is maybe a patch of skin on the body of Christ, and it could just be skin cancer. Maybe it's time for it to go. What we want, and I'm saying this for the benefit of everybody listening, I think this, but for the benefit of everybody listening, what we want is for the body of Christ to survive and thrive. And sometimes you had to do a medical procedure and amputate a toe or a finger or a leg or something like that. Sometimes in order for the body to survive, it has to be made very clear that this XYZ portion here is actually not part of our body. This is either defunct or gangrene, or it's a parasite, something like this. It needs to go. Do not make the mistake of confusing this with the body of Christ. And people feel, like we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, people feel guilty like they're doing something bad, like they're the one causing division. And I mean, it's like looking a child in the eye when you have to cut their arm off to save their life. It's a horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, somebody's got to have the wisdom and the resolve and the decisiveness and the tolerance level to recognize that it has to be done. And so if somebody is preaching, if they have completely resorted to, they think they're equating Reformed theology with the gospel, that is no longer a church. I mean, based on Galatians 1:6-9, that is no longer a church. You are not actually shutting down a church. If you were to blow it up, and by the way, we're using that phrase metaphorically. Nobody's talking about bombs or explosives or anything. We're talking about social disarray. We're not talking about explosives or actually hurting anybody physically. But if you were to do that, I don't think you would actually be doing anything to a legit church. That's my opinion, and I know a lot of people would disagree with that. But the body of Christ, when you zoom out, get the bigger perspective and see the entire body of Christ, that is actually not part of it. That's my opinion.
No, and for me, it's taken a lot of soul searching to realize that all churches.
And when you've been there for 30 years.
Yeah, it was a tough transition. My wife really, it drove some depression for her. Sorry, not going to get emotional. But it hurt my family, my daughter. One of the terrible things was my family. They watched that sermon online, and my middle daughter was just texting me, "Dad, stop them, make them stop. Dad, please, they're lying." I mean, oh my gosh! And all I could do was text, "No, stop, no." And she just kept, "Please, Daddy, make him stop, make him quit telling these lies," because she knew that the things he was saying about us weren't truth. And man, I can't stand a liar, Kevin. I can't. It's okay to disagree, and you've said this before about it's okay if you have your own Reformed church. But when someone comes in deceiving you, trying to do this snaky thing, and then deceiving, and lying.
When you ask them straight up at the beginning, "Are you a Calvinist?" and they say no and try to use his other terminology, I don't think there's any other way to say that is just wicked. They're exploiting your ignorance, which they took a bet on and happened to win.
Yeah,
and they didn't know what you meant. No, I'm not a Calvinist. I'm a Reformed theologian. What do you think they meant when they asked that question?
Let me tell you how bad it is. This is a great example.
There
was a meeting that happened kind of after the big blow up, the Sunday morning service. And one of the comments came from the youth guy. We said, "Hey, we didn't understand what was going on." And he actually, I love this guy, but he said, it was the search committee's job, if they didn't understand, the next time they met, to dig in better to understand what Calvinism was. And I was like, are you serious? If you're at a job interview and when someone obviously doesn't understand what you're talking about, you need to take time to go, time out. Anybody with good ethics would go, time out. I don't think you understand my position here. I want to have a healthy relationship that lasts for years. And so let me clarify what I say when I say Reformed theology. that did not happen.
So it'd be like if somebody on a job interview asked you if you were an engineer, and you're like, "No, I'm a kinetic science applicationist." Yep. It's nothing short of deception.
They don't admit they don't know it. They just go, "Oh, that's great." Yeah.
That's why in that little video where I talk about, Calvinist infiltration prevention resolution, I cover all the stuff. It's like not doctrines of grace, sovereignty, sovereign grace, Reformed theology, any leanings, because there's so many ways. And this, I wish that your church was the one-off, but it's not. I mean, I'm talking to somebody else right now, emailing back and forth where the same thing happened with their pastor, and I happen to personally know of another one where they straight up get asked, "Are you a Calvinist?" They weasel the way out of it using semantics, and then turns out, lo and behold, they're Calvinist. I mean, like you didn't know what those people meant when they were asking that question.
That's exactly right. And folks, hear that. Hear this. I mean, that's the deception right at the beginning. That's my problem, is when it comes to deception, you're like, "Oh, maybe he did, maybe he didn't." No. If you and your potential wife are dating, and there's a massive, let's just say abortion, that you're pro-abortion and she's not,
Yep.
You better get that out and talk about that. So if you hide your position and then get married, that's deception. And that's the same type of thing.
If you say you're for abortion, then you later on, that's just you're not or whatever, that's going to come out.
Yeah.
And regardless of your position, you're now a liar. And in addition to whatever the flaw in your position is.
That's what happened here. So we got conned. I'm not proud of it.
That's a con job. That's a con job if I ever heard one.
It is. And so, as of today, our elders' body has resigned. We're moving on. Hey, we'll be okay. I mean, honestly, I know that maybe it was time after 30 years to get a new start, get out of my comfort zone. I guess I wasn't going to do it on my own. And whether it's a God thing or not, I'm cautious sometimes, speaking for God. God did this to me, God is sovereign, but it's still a mystery. But nonetheless, I'm out, and I think a good thing can come from it. But it wasn't done right. There was a lot of things done wrong. And there's a lot of good people on the outside looking in. And if you want to know what really worries me more, I'll be fine. My wife will be fine. But I really worry what it's going to do to my teenage daughters. I think they're strong enough, but you know as well as I do that teenagers are very impressionable. And I pray they don't walk away with this hurt and what the church is a toxic, dirty thing. And I worry about that,
Yeah, there's a lot of teenagers who go into early adulthood and suddenly have no longer have any use for church. And I know some people who speak of their time in fundamentalist churches as having been traumatized. And I can see that. When speaking of teenage daughters, when you were talking a second ago about when your daughter was asking you, she was texting you or something, "Daddy, make them stop, make them stop." I think I might be confused about what, was he just talking about Calvinism there, or was he talking about the situation at church and talking about the people and what was going on?
He just uncorked, and basically on the Sunday morning, just saying that the elders and he had gotten, we're at odds. We didn't really want him to. He loved us. How much he loved us. And then, but basically we didn't want him to preach the gospel. And I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but it was just all these maligning things that made it sound like I just want to preach the gospel. And
who on earth would believe that you ask him at the beginning, "Are you a Calvinist?" Later, he lies about it, turns out to be a Calvinist, and now his new cover story is, "They don't want me to preach the gospel."
Yep. I just want to preach the gospel. And anybody hearing that is going,
I mean, who's the father of lies here?
Yeah.
This behavior, and you're not supposed to say certain things, but this behavior does not come from the Holy Spirit. It definitely does not come from the Holy Spirit. There's no Holy Spirit out there trying to get people to deceive others and mislead them into the truth by using clever word games and semantics That's not how Paul said we use great plainness of speech. When Paul was finished talking, there's no doubt in your mind what he was trying to say, unless you're a Calvinist in Romans 9. But anyway, the point is, there's great plainness of speech. You say exactly what you're trying to say, and if someone asks you if you're a Calvinist, answer the question honestly. When someone tells you not to preach, don't use the gospel as a cover story for Gnosticism.
That's a great thing. And I didn't, one of the things one of my buddies kept saying was that, and he didn't really mean it because, you know what? I think it's okay if you preach Calvinism, if you will just get up on the pulpit and say, I want you to know that I believe a lot of you, no matter how much you want to come to Christ, you're doomed to hell and there's not a thing you can do about it. And he was never going to say that. So he goes,
no, you want him to be honest. Present what you really believe.
Yeah, just say that. And then okay, go ahead. Because they're not gonna want to hear anything you have to say. But one time he would never even say that. And finally he used the word, and he said, what do you say to that? He goes, well, we just like to call it passed over. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the best you can get. It's passed over. That's the closest you can get.
Derek Murrell used that against an atheist. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Heading to hell. We just like to call it passed over.
I shouldn't be laughing.
That's as close as he got. That's as close as he got.
It's so predictable. It's such a formulaic script that they're just reading. It's all simulated thinking. There's no actual thinking going on in their head.
Well, and here's what I contend. When someone says, well, maybe if you came up and you're not a Christian, you say, hey, Loren, do you believe I don't believe in Jesus, that I'm going to hell? And I'd say, yes, I take no pleasure in it. I don't want you to take that choice. But yeah, I'm not going to lie to them. Anybody would ask me, I would say, yeah, if you don't call on the name of the Lord and you're not saved, you're going to go to hell. I mean, there's no pleasure. I wish I would petition to the Lord to change that. God, please change this. Do away with that. But that's not my call. I could still ask. But a Calvinist won't. Most won't. A pastor typically won't say, yeah, I believe a lot. And, tons of people they can't call on the name of the Lord. They can't be saved. However you want to spin it. It's not happening. They don't have free will. They won't say it.
And so whenever we do say it, whenever we call it out, we get called straw menners, or you're not allowed to say those things. So there's like this thread, like in the Bolshevik Russian Revolution, they weren't allowed to say out loud that, hey, we had more grain under the czars than we do under the revolution. That's what you could see, but you weren't allowed to say it. And so there's like this regime where you're not allowed to say what's obvious to everyone. Mm-hmm. And then when, like with political correctness right now, it's like, I know that person's calling themselves a woman, but that's a man. I happen to know better. You're not allowed to say it. You see?
That's right.
And in Calvinism, obviously, there is absolutely no reason for evangelism even. And obviously, God hates most people, wants to send them to hell, and there's no hope for them and no savior for them. And has chosen before the foundation of the world to send them to hell and delights in doing so, according to Calvinism. But you're not allowed to come out and say it that way. I mean, that's obviously what's going on, but you're not allowed to say it. So I would encourage people to watch out for any system that encourages you to censor your own perspective and dial it back for the sake of whatever, like you're going to offend people or whatever. This world will move forward in the correct direction if people can truthfully represent their own perspective. And when you see a system like Calvinism and it's obvious, like you were just saying, they just need to say these things from the pulpit. We need to be able to come out and say those things which are obvious, which we see. Say it clearly. Say it plainly. Share your perspective. And what they're trying to do is get everybody to outsource their own perspective to a unified perspective, which happens to not be true. And they use pressure and they use a lot of good godly things for that. You don't want to cause division, do you, brother? But they're suppressing truth. They're suppressing the truth of God and unrighteousness. So I have several questions, but here's what I want to ask you.
Sure.
Let me think for a second how I want to word this. Let's go back to, okay, it's 5 years ago. We have ignorant Loren Swor, who doesn't know anything about Calvinism.
Yep.
And I'm Jonah, right? And I happen to know, because I can predict the future. I have a message from God. Calvinism is coming your way. And I need to prepare you to not be ignorant about it anymore, brush up on it and do something about it. How do I get your attention? How do I get, like, you take the ignorant church back when Calvinism was not a threat, and it was able to take over the church because everybody was ignorant. And I'm not, like you said, I'm not using ignorant as a pejorative word. It's just descriptive.
Yeah.
But people aren't interested until it hits them. How, and this is one of my struggles, and I don't know if you have any insight on this, but what can we do to get people interested in becoming more informed about this? Like the pulpit committee, the search committee, who asked, "Are you a Calvinist?" And then he threw them off with, "Well, I believe in the doctrines of grace and Reformed theology, but not Calvinism." How do we get them to at least not be that ignorant? What do we do? What kind of thing can we do to raise people's awareness and incentivize them and motivate them to want to become more aware in this issue so that this doesn't happen? How do we fight that battle?
Well, I think it's on us, people such as myself, to keep sharing the word. I shared the brief video, the 14-minute video that you did on Facebook. Without comments, I said we're not going to do comments, but so the word got out there because people have to even know what Calvinism is there. So it is our responsibility as Christians to spread that word. Although I hate it because there's non-Christians that they kind of get caught in the peripheral, and I don't like that. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, this is a higher thing that has to be addressed. I even made a point. There was I don't remember who it was. It was Elena's story or something like that. It was a great video I saw the other day about a gal who was in a Calvinist church, and she shared her testimony also. Sharing stuff like that doesn't have to be confrontational, but awakening. And even myself sharing my story with my family and friends that I know, if I can touch 10, 100 people, the word gets out. But remember, I went back to equate that evil prevails when good men do nothing, and women too. So we have to speak out. We have to make it known. We have to sound the cry because this is a bad thing. And so it's on us. It's on us to get the word out. Flat out. That's the only way. I understand your question, but I think it's on the worker bees to get the word out.
So when people find out they're Christians and they find out I have a YouTube channel, and I might meet them at a variety of places. I might meet them at a restaurant or on the volleyball court, or just anywhere. And then, "Oh, you have a YouTube channel? What do you talk about?" I'm like, "Well," and I try to be like, "Well, we cover, theology. I do a lot of stuff on Calvinism. Have a little 10-second elevator speech just to kind of, because I don't want to turn the whole, I don't want to dominate the whole conversation with what my YouTube channel is about, because it's kind of nuanced and detailed." So as soon as I say Calvinism, they're like, they're Christians, or maybe Southern Baptists or non-denominational, something like that. And they're like, "Calvinism? What's that?" And so that's the struggle. That's my struggle. So every time a Christian says that, and then they ask me, like, "Why do you spend all this time doing this stuff on Calvinism?" Like, you don't understand. For the people that this has happened to, it is completely turned their world upside down. And if Absolutely. It hasn't happened to you, you're completely, ignorance is bliss. You're completely naive and ignorant, have no idea that there's this thing out there chewing up and spitting out churches and separating churches and families. How much pain has been caused because of this? How much, you're worried about whether or not your daughters are going to turn away from the church because of this issue. And then we got somebody else going, "What's Calvinism? Why are you spending so much time on it?" So I just be honest, it's a little frustrating to me, because I think you and I share the same perspective, which is, man, we have to get word out somehow. But I also don't know how to get people to realize that it's worth paying attention to before it's too late for them. Because it's
personal testimonies. It's sharing because they'll listen to someone's.
By the time they go to that Google page and start typing in videos on Calvinism, it's too late. I mean, it's probably too late to save their church at that point.
I agree, because you're a troublemaker. When you start pushing back, you're a troublemaker.
Yeah, you're a troublemaker.
But I'll say this: I found that Calvinism and the problems that we've experienced recently has actually allowed me to share the gospel, because suddenly you'd be surprised that someone who's not a Christian, and you say, hey, there's some people out here that believe that you can't call on the name of the Lord and be saved unless you're elect, and like, what? It gets their attention. So like, I'll use it, that's cool.
Absolutely. So, it's a natural conversation starter.
Absolutely. It's a different spin there. And hey, I want to clarify something. So our pastor, my previous pastor, was very big on preaching the gospel and doing altar calls and sharing the gospel. I know some do, some don't. Yeah. So I want to make sure at least I do justice and don't give a wrong impression. Although you and I know that the way it's done and the thinking is still, why you're doing it like a robot.
It's an aporia for sure.
Yeah. So I just wanted to qualify that. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. We don't want to misrepresent people necessarily. All right, I want to say this. Some of you listening out there may not know this, but Loren here is probably directly responsible for our little 12-minute video on what is Calvinism. And the reason for that is because he contacted me, explained what was going on in his church. He's like, look, you got good stuff on Calvinism out there, but here's what I need. I got a bunch of people who they're not going to sit for an hour-long video. I need something short that just tells me what it is. And the reason I want to say that is because in your particular church, let's say you come to the channel, you need something to share for the rest of your church. If there's, hey, I really need my deacons to hear this topic and I need it in 8 minutes or less. If it's something like that, let me know. We will try to tailor up a video that is bespoke to your situation so that it can be used. So that, I mean, basically, Loren, your request is responsible for that video. If there's a need out there, and also I'm starting to do these, I'm trying this new thing. I'm calling them BTF shorts, where we're going to put out little videos that are somewhere around 10 minutes or so instead of our hour-long ones. So if somebody wants to dig down deep and stay long and that kind of thing, there's that material. But then there's also the little snippet version to at least introduce you to the concept for these different things. But I want to put that out there.
That video, oh my goodness, what a point of contention. Not in a bad way, but oh my goodness, yeah. I compare it to like light on a cockroach or on a vampire. Take that video down. That's so, why are you sharing this, attacking, us and all that? It's like, I don't say anything about anything. I said, here, watch this video on Calvinism. You can go check my Facebook page. Actually, I pulled it down, but I'm going to put it back up because I said, for the short term, I said, we'll do a truce. But even then, it's just great video. Please watch, no comments. That's it. And so, but it was just totally received from the other side. It's just the most horrible thing. You're destroying, attacking our families and all that stuff. It's like, really? I mean, maybe you need to look at it the other way and see. Yeah. So.
Nobody's name's mentioned?
No, not at all. Not at all. Exactly. So, but it really, several meetings, it kept coming up. What about that video? You can take that video down? It's like, yeah. So I joke with Kevin that you and I as pictures are probably like a dartboard.
That's probably right.
Oh, that guy.
Like in a video game, when you encounter enemies, you're going in the right direction.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, some other comment. I guess we probably already hit on some of these things, but some things that popped out while you were talking. 3 words occurred to me: decisiveness, tolerance, and resolve. And resolve is like, okay, what's the temperature check on the climate of the people once they recognize Calvinism is in the church? What is their resolve to do something? What is their willingness to tolerate it? And how decisive are they? And I guess that kind of bleeds over into resolve as well. And then when they are decisive, what are they going to do about it? I really want to, so if you're just thinking about a local church, like this is happening to my church, I want people to zoom out and see the bigger picture. Right now, leaving seminaries right now, there are Calvinist pastors or trained pastors who are going to, on purpose, try to find non-Calvinist churches that they can take over on behalf of Calvinism. They're out there right now. And from what I can tell, and it's just anecdotal, but from what I can tell, there is absolutely no pushback. They just have free reign. Everywhere they go, it's kind of like the church where you described it. People don't know. They might know enough to ask, are you a Calvinist? And they don't want a Calvinist, but they're slick enough to where they can talk their way out of it. There's nobody prepared. Yep. These people are out there. I would love to see, and not just I think it would be great for the body of Christ to send a message to Calvinists for there to be some pushback somewhere where this is not successful, where Calvinists try to take over, they get caught, they get removed, and then other Calvinists who are trying to take over start to realize, oh, this isn't going to be as easy as I thought. There's resistance. There's more awareness now. And then other churches start to learn. They start to grow and multiply and get the word out, like you were saying, personal testimony. Hey, look what happened in our church. Watch out. It's probably happening to yours too. I would like to see, for the sake of all the rest of the churches, somebody needs to have the resolve and the decisiveness and the tolerance level to do something decisive about this kind of deception. Like we will not stand for this move. And what you guys did, I think all you guys resigned. All the whole elders resigned. And that's a statement. That's quite a statement. And I don't think, I would guess, and I don't know anything about the situation at your church right now, but I would guess that the fallout hasn't quite settled yet from whatever's going to happen from that. Because sometimes take a year or two to brew, and then people will start to recognize, hey, and maybe even this video, people will start to recognize, hey, wow, that is kind of deception. Even though I agree with Reformed theology, that's kind of messed up that somebody would do that. Maybe you should go to a church that says Sovereign Grace Baptist Church instead of trying to take this one over. Why do you have to deceive if you're doing the right thing? Why are you pushing this under the cover story of the gospel? All this duplicitous semantic word games, maybe somebody will wake up to that. And even if you're a Calvinist out there, you got to recognize that infiltrating non-Calvinist churches and lying about what you are, you can't think that's right.
It's not right. Not right
you can't.
That's what's so mind-blowing, that people I really looked up and good friends, and I'm like, come on. I mean, you know better. I don't. Like I said, I've used the word divisive. It is such a divisive thing. Obviously, it divided our church. Of course, our church is not church split, as you can tell. We just resigned, and wow, yeah, very, very, very painful. And once again, a well-crafted Calvinist pastor is a slick talking dude. He'll talk. It's like jungle, whatever, when the python, or he's doing the snake charmer, he's looking in the python's eyes, and
Jungle Book.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, oh, okay. And it's like, what happened? You gotta slap yourself. Wake up! It's really tricky. There's no doubt.
I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do want to. I think this needs to be said that when stuff like this happens at a church, it's easy for outsiders to think, oh, a church split happened, and you just see this little, like a firework, and you don't really think anything else of it. But all the people who were involved, the kids, the families, the teenagers, the wives, those people are hurt. And they had a major disruption in their social life, in how they relate to God and how they communally relate to God. All this stuff has been disrupted. And if you had say you had a favorite Bible verse that got preached on a lot, and now after this happens, every time you see that, it makes you sad. Say you had a favorite song that your church sang all the time, and now every time you hear it, it makes you sad. It reminds you of this hurt. And so it attaches all this pain and trauma and emotional, and that has the tendency to result in resentment.
Yes, absolutely.
And so in a marriage, for example, even though, say, a husband and wife leave together, but it's very hurtful, the resentment that gets harbored can play itself out in that marriage over the next 15, 20 years. Even though this thing happened, like you think it's just this one thing that happened on a calendar back in 2021 or so, but really these families are suffering the fallout of this for decades to come because this stuff is painful. And people harbor resentment. They're not sure what to do about it. And it has lasting impact. It has a lasting impact that I think is it's complex. It's almost nearly impossible to quantify. So it's not something to take lightly.
There'll be a lot of ramifications for my family as people I'm sure won't want to talk to us or whatever. And I don't know. I mean, the truth's the truth. And I don't know, but it's tough sometimes being maligned, and I know there's a lot of stuff that's been said that, you get it, but it is what it is. I have to deal with the fact that some people are going to believe that a false doctrine, but so be it,
Yeah,
it's tough.
And it's going to take its toll. Well, we've been going for about an hour and a half almost. Hour 26 minutes is what my timer says up here. I really appreciate you coming on. You got any last pointers you want to leave everybody with? Anything you want to mention or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for your ministry, and of course, I'm on a YouTube video with you. So I mean, it's again, but I mean it sincerely.
Welcome aboard.
You have the ability. What I liked about you, Kevin, was that you cut right to the chase, which is as an engineer, that's what I like. I don't like all the fluff banner. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about what's real, what the problem is. And then people, wake up. I know that's what you're saying all the time, but wake up. And like you said just a minute ago, it may be too late. If you don't know what Calvinism is, you better find out. You better find out fast because you need to look for those key words, and then you'll get woke. And once you're woke, you'll hear in the sermon if it's there. You should.
That's true.
Spread the word. Spread the word, folks. You're doing a disservice. And I keep going back to this, evil prevails when good men and good women do nothing. It's your job to share this truth, to have that conversation. If nothing else, uses witnessing opportunity to someone to say, hey, you know what Calvinism is? Because some people are like, don't share with me about Jesus. Well, instead say, you know what Calvinism is?
Start somewhere else. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I do thank you for the work that you do. I'm sure you have a lot of people who don't like you. I'm sure, but that's okay.
I thrive on it.
You got it, because it can't be a popularity contest. Just
right.
Go to the truth. And I'll say this. I'll stop at this. I said it earlier. Read the Bible from beginning to end.
Yep.
And I don't know what Kool-Aid you're drinking if you think that's not a God calling to all mankind. And you said in one of your videos, and I'm jumping on your high horse here, you said the gospel means good news.
Yep.
And you can just make it so simple. Okay, good news. And then you go with the angels and they say, good news to all men. Well, then the angels are lying because it wasn't.
Yep. A bunch of lying angels.
Come on. I mean, wake up, people. Wake up. It doesn't fit the narrative. I've got 1,000 words that support free will and God calling to you and wanting you. And then I got one verse that has this, well, that's kind of strange, and you can research it, but it throws some confusion. Come on. Do statistics say, obviously.
The preponderance of the evidence or this one obscure passage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. God is not a God of deception. No way.
Amen. That's well said. That's a great line. God is not a God of deception. All right. So I think we'll end it right there. I covet people's feedback. If there's somebody out there who's going through something like this at your church, we will do whatever we can to try to help, whether it's make videos, show up and talk to people, or, email, whatever you need. We'll try to do something to help you. All right. Because this definitely has to be addressed, definitely has to be stopped. And, your pastor of your church may have the bully pulpit, but everybody at your church got YouTube. And so it's not like it was in the 90s. There are ways that we can fight back against this stuff now. We can put material out there and put it in the hands of everybody so that they can become aware and awake to what's going on. So thanks, Loren, for coming on. I know you and I will keep talking, and maybe we'll come on and do another video someday soon. But I very much look forward to staying in touch. And everybody else out there, thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and have a good day.
Thanks, Kim.